All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OneSoccer. I'm your host for today, Josh Deming, joined by my colleague Alex Gonge-Ruzik. And today, we have a Canada manager shortlist update. A massive article was dropped. KJ was already reporting on it a little bit. But we have some names to discuss today. So first things first, though, Alex, welcome, obviously, to the stream. As always, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Excited to talk about all this. I mean, got so much to dive into. I got names. You got a list. It's quite the update.
You got some fascinating one. We have a very nice and structured live stream today, but I just want to start off, Alex, by getting your just initial reaction, because I felt pretty strong about that. Basically, that Biello was probably going to take on the Copa America, and then I assumed maybe they would see how he did and then decide for the World Cup. I didn't really think that they would get a manager in a quick enough time to be able to take on both tournaments. Are you a little surprised by that these names are dropping, and if we actually do bring in a new manager, or do you still think that there's a more of a chance that it could still be Biello?
That's a good question, because I think it depends on, I guess, your optimism of the Canadian Federation and what they're able to do. Because I think there's a scenario where there's a lot of natural surprise, just because it's like, Mauro Biello, ended up sticking around as an interim for a few camps when it felt like he'd only maybe be a short-term option, and that kind of indicated he's going to be the guy for Copa America. But then on the flip side, I think this is just a continuation of what Kevin Blue has brought since he was hired as CEO. He's obviously got ambitions, and he wants to change things. And what I like is that this is the exact sort of shortlist that fans wanted. As soon as John Herdman left, people like, all right, let's start looking at names. This is pretty much, I won't give any names because we're going to dive into them specifically, but you got some guys in your own backyard. You got some international managers who are pretty well known, some guys with some good club experience, some guys looking for jobs. That's a pretty darn solid shortlist, and I think that's exactly what you want. It doesn't always mean you're going out and you're calling, the top dogs and they're going to accept interviews with Canada. But hey, the fact that Canada is making the calls is huge, because they should be, even if some of these guys are saying no. So I'm encouraged that Kevin Blue's already brought that, the willingness to make calls, even if they might come up on a ringtone or a voicemail or something like that.
So let's do a quick little recap for everyone here. And if you are just joining us right now, be sure to drop a like on this stream, say hello in the chat. There's a lot of candidates we're going to discuss today, but I just want to give everyone a quick, just little update. So basically, a few days ago, a colleague of ours, Kristian Jack, went out and reported that there was around 4 candidates right now for the men's national team job that were coming in to be interviewed, and that indeed one of them was American. And then fast forward a little bit until this morning, where Nizaar Kinsella basically dropped a bomb, really. Like, I wasn't expecting this today, which was pretty exciting, and said that he had an exclusive that Jesse Marsh and Gunnar Solskjaer have been discussed as options for the Canada job as they co-host the 2026 World Cup. It's interesting, and we'll get into this. It's unclear if either would take it, and then talking about Marsh and Gunnar Solskjaer, and then mentions that Jose Mourinho declines the opportunity, as a shock for everyone here. More on that later. The article goes into a little bit more options as well, talking about different candidates. So let's just start off there, Alex. So obviously KJ releasing that was exciting. We speculated. I was pretty vocal. I was trying to pull some connections to see if I could figure out if indeed the American manager was Jesse Marsh. I had without fully being able to go on X and saying yes, is Jesse Marsh. I feel like through the connections I had someone who I trusted that said they believe it is. So now that it has been confirmed, that's good to know, because we've discussed Jesse Marsh a ton. But let's just quickly go over who was interviewed / contacted. So like I mentioned, Gunnar Solskjaer, Jesse Marsh, which we knew, Paul Clement, who has links to Carlo Ancelotti, very interesting. Aitor, Karanka, who has got links to, I believe, Jose Mourinho. We'll get into him later. Bobby Smyrniotis, Tommy Wilden Jr., and then, of course, who was contacted and rejected was Frank Lampard and Jose Mourinho. So quickly, Alex, going and starting with the contacted out of that list right there. Anyone you want to begin with that maybe sticks out to you? And I'm kind of maybe looking at Gunnar Solskjaer, because I think that was the name that really woke a lot of Canadians up this morning.
Yeah, I think we can definitely start with Solskjaer, just because I think he's someone where That's a pretty well-known name. Obviously from his playing days with Manchester United, scored a pretty big Champions League final goal back in 1999, as some might remember. And then he ended up coaching the team for a couple of years. They had some pretty good highs, I guess you can say, like when they beat PSG in the Champions League, and I think it would have been 2019. Finished second, I think, in the league a few times. Then ultimately they just didn't really progress much towards that title of dethroning City. He ends up leaving, and then Ten Hag ended up coming in. I think that one's big because, look, we can dive into what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer can bring based on what he brought at his United stint, what kind of manager, what kind of profile. At the end of the day, that's an ex-Premier League manager, one with a pretty decently sized profile. I think on paper, it's a bit of an interesting name to see that, Canada's reached out and that there clearly appears to be some sort of interest in Solskjaer, where it's not like Mourinho, Lampard, where interest was there. They said thanks, but no thanks. The fact that there is some sort of mutual interest is intriguing, because I think you remove the profile, the fact that it's an ex-Premier League manager who managed Manchester United, that's a pretty big profile of manager.
I agree, and that's the one. Like, I don't know. I'm torn on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer whether I want to see him. I feel like I put him with the kind of the Frank Lampard, exciting, big name. I just don't know if I don't know. I just don't know if he's the right man for this job. I've seen a lot of split decisions on this over on X. I've seen a lot being like, yeah, like Ole at the wheel, what can go wrong? But I've seen a lot who aren't impressed really. We have Chris Talks Footy here who says Ole's at the wheel. Tell me how good does it feel? Well, he created a little song. Big Manchester United fan, I know Chris is. Like I said, I'm just not overly. I'm not overly convinced that it's a good option for him. But by looking at the other two names on there, I feel like Jesse Marsch is still where my head's going on, and we have a big section of this stream that is going to be dedicated to him. But Solskjaer is an exciting name, and I feel like when you see Thierry Henry, when you see Frank Lampard, when you see these superstars of the past kind of come back in and be linked to this job, it's exciting. And I would ask you, Alex, when I saw Frank Lampard and Thierry Henry being linked, obviously I'd say superstars, not the most successful coaching careers, but I would have a lot of power over dual nats. Do you think if Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was actually brought in, do you think he'd have just as much impact as a Frank Lampard or a Thierry Henry when it comes to dual nat recruitment? Because we have some exciting ones coming up, and I want someone who can come in and be able to, to be a big presence and maybe even deal with some egos too, just in terms of the team in itself.
I would think so, just because, of course, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, before he went to, I guess it would have been to United, he was at Molde, and there he worked with the young Erling Haaland, and it sounds like he always left an impression on Haaland. So I think there's obviously some sort of, there's some sort of connection there in the sense that Solskjaer has worked with a decent profile of player before, and I think there's countless examples at United where he had some pretty decent players that came to the club under his time there. Like I think Bruno Fernandes would have been signed under him. He had to deal with the likes of a Pogba while he was there. Some other intriguing names. So I think, maybe it's not a Thierry Henry in terms of just like that's someone who everyone knows based on his playing days. Of course, those who are closer to Manchester United fandom will think of the goal in '99 and whatnot. But he wasn't, of course, that same caliber of player. But I still think he's shown that he's dealt with a decent enough caliber of player that he could bring that. So I think the dual national point's an interesting one, and it's weird to rate his United time in charge, because I feel like one thing that does stand out to him, it felt like he was always pretty decent in tournament settings, like in the Champions League, like in cups, but then he never actually won a trophy in charge of United. So that's something where, again, I'll mix things to review from stint in charge of United in terms of dealing with players and then the results he got.
Seems like some of the chat here enjoys Ole, especially playing with a back four. I think it's interesting though that two of these candidates have both managed Erling Haaland, Jesse Marsch with him at Salzburg, and of course, like you just mentioned, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as well. Does it bother you, Alex, that he hasn't managed a club since Manchester United back in 20? So he managed them from 2018 to 2021. So it's 2024 right now. It's 3 years without a job. Just very quickly, does it bother you at all?
I don't think so because I think it sounded like I remember seeing an interview from him last year, completely out of context. He just seemed really relaxed. Like it's something when you have to remember the sort of pressure that a job like Manchester United brings, where it's like a club with such big expectations. The end of his tenure was right when Ronaldo was brought back into the club, and obviously that came with it a lot of attention, a lot of drama, a lot of everything that would come into that. I think it's probably something where he just, he was at United for a good couple seasons. I wasn't. I was like that doesn't bring too much of a surprise. It's a big job, and why rush into something right after the back of jobs like that? Because most of the jobs you were linked to, it's like, oh, come be a manager of a relegation scrap team. And look, that's something that Jesse Marsh did, and look how it turned out for him. He helped Leeds survive. But then the next year, it's like it's such a battle trying to play a certain, like when you're in charge of a relegation scrap, there's this expectation to win, to play a certain way, and it's not always conducive for someone like a Marsh who wants to play a bit more up tempo, free flowing football. I know Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is a bit more of that school of thought. I think he just made sense for him to wait for the best option, because I don't think relegation scrap was his brand.
So let's move on now to the schools of Ancelotti and Mourinho. And it's funny because, there's a tongue-in-cheek moment we've had here on OneSoccer about Ancelotti, mostly Ancelotti for a long time, just because, there's been a few quotes about him and his connection to Canada. Jose Mourinho is obviously out there, a big manager without a club right now. So we've been linked to them, kind of. But the fascinating thing is that two of these managers on here are basically assistants of these two. So to give you guys a quick little background, Paul Clement is an assistant, or has been an assistant of Ancelotti, and he's had a ton of success as an assistant, winning 3 different trophies, including the Premier League at Chelsea. He's won Ligue 1 at PSG. He's won 4 different trophies at Real Madrid, including, of course, the Champions League. He went out on his own at Derby, Swansea, Reading, went to Belgium, was an assistant at Everton, hasn't found as much success being on his own, but he's being linked to the job, as well as Aitor Karanka, who is the assistant, or has been the assistant of Jose Mourinho, and it was back in 2010. He was the assistant there, so there's a connection there, and it's funny that they left and then in came Ancelotti. So out of those two names, Alex, does one kind of stick out to you more than the other? And I think Paul Clement is the one that stuck out to you, if I remember what you said before the stream.
Yeah, I think the Clement shout is interesting, that he has that experience with Ancelotti multiple times. I think that's always a good sign too, that it wasn't just like, oh, coincidental. Obviously, he came through Chelsea under a Mourinho, around when Mourinho was there.
Yeah.
But then Ancelotti brought him in, of course, at PSG, because Ancelotti spent there, and then Ancelotti brought him to Real Madrid. They ended up winning a Champions League there. They had a chance too, which is interesting, reading that they both of them worked with Zidane, because of course Zidane took over right after Ancelotti, so they had a chance to work within that group. They managed some pretty big stars and egos there. Then he went on his own. Then Ancelotti brought him back at Bayern. I think it's telling that 3 different times Ancelotti went to these jobs, he brought Clement along. And I think it's intriguing because Ancelotti puts a lot of emphasis on his backroom staff. That's kind of his strength of Ancelotti, is that he's very much like, he's like a father. He's like, it's a collective for him. Like you see with this Real Madrid team, like he really kind of runs the whole operation in terms of making sure everyone's managing the minutes, managing the personalities, making sure everything clicks. But then he also wants to give the guys a bit of freedom. But don't get me wrong, there's kind of this theory out there that, Ancelotti is just a vibes manager. He's not a pep. Okay, maybe he isn't out there obsessing over, I know what this team's left back's going to be in the 66th minute, and if they make this substitution, we're going to change our entire way of playing. But he places a lot of emphasis on his backroom staff, and Clement's been a very trusted man at some very key stops. So I think that's intriguing, and I think it shows that there's some strong tactical acumen, some strong back, like all those things as an assistant can be very key. Although it is interesting that he has struggled a bit on his own. Although when you look at some of the jobs he's taken, like Swansea, Derby County, those can also Reading, like those can also be tough jobs for managers to take. Cercle Bruges as well, like he's kind of going outside the big three in Belgium. It also makes sense why he hasn't had the most success as an individual manager, although that's something to keep an eye on Canada, which is also kind of in that similar scenario of, okay, they're not the biggest country in the world right now. They're one on the rise. Could Clement show to handle a job like that?
And Carlo Ancelotti obviously would be the dream. I love and respect everything that he's done in the game. He's kind of like just the dream. I remember when Madrid brought Ancelotti in, it's because he's a no fuss kind of guy. He'll go in, he'll play the cards that he was dealt, and he's done an incredible job, especially I think in this spell right now with this Madrid side, with some big names like Ronaldo and Benzema leaving. He comes in, he doesn't complain, he's great with players, and he's delivered. I think he's got a sensational track record right now. And I thought once maybe when he went to Everton that maybe that was it was time for him to maybe move on, but it just shows the quality he has. In that article, it mentioned that maybe they were looking at Paul Clement with the option of maybe Ancelotti down the road. I don't know if I 100% agree with that. I personally don't see Ancelotti taking over the men's national team. Maybe I'm just, lame and not very hopeful. I just don't think it's a real option. I think it's interesting that Clement has been contacted. I don't know what it means. Alex, am I being, too negative? Do you think that there's a chance one day that Ancelotti comes to Canada, maybe like post 2026 World Cup, I guess? But that's what the article was kind of hinting to, and I just don't know if I believe it.
Yeah, I think it's obviously some speculation from the author's part, no doubt, in the article, but I think it's intriguing and it could help explain why they might go all in on someone like Clement, because as I mentioned, his assistant resume, exceptional, like super intrigued by that. But then you look at his head coaching record, a bit more mixed, partly due to circumstance, partly you do wonder, okay, would he be suited? At the same time, it's hard to tell what's going through Ancelotti's brain, right? He obviously there was that very weird, was he not going to go to Brazil? It seemed like he was, and all of a sudden it stopped, even though Brazil had announced he was going to come. Very weird scenario. He obviously is happy at Real Madrid. He's going to stay at least another year. I think it is till 2025. The reality is we have no idea what he's going to do next year. Maybe they win 2 Champions Leagues like this year and next year, and he's just decided, all right, I've won enough. Like, I'm bored. Let's move on. Of course, there's the connection with his wife being from Vancouver. He's mentioned he'd be interested with playing or managing a Canada. Of course, that's been kind of tongue-in-cheek. But you never know. Maybe there's a scenario where he finishes that Real Madrid job in 2025. Clement is in charge of the men's national team. Clement says, look, maybe you don't want to go be... Because where do you go from Real Madrid, right? Like, is he going to go coach Bayern again? Is he going to go coach a PSG again? Like, he's kind of been there, done that. Maybe there's a scenario where they'll just... Clement's like, hey, look, come join me on our staff. We're about to go to a World Cup. You're familiar with the country, you can stay in your where your wife's from, and there's that scenario. But of course, that's very unlikely. I'm not kidding. Don't kid yourself. But maybe that's the kind of scenario that Canada's kind of seeing play out in their mind.
So Ancelotti is not realistic. Jose Mourinho is not realistic. And I woke up this morning to my fantastic boss, Armin, message me about a clip that he found. So we worked on something today, and Armin was having a little fun on X. I had to make sure that people are aware that this is for fun. This was a parody. I haven't seen the clip yet, but on X this morning, I saw a lot of people talk about the links to Mourinho, that he rejected Canada, and we're like, obviously he rejected Canada. There was no interest in Canada. So we had a little fun, and maybe I had a virtual meeting with Mr. Mourinho. So let's take a look. I'm watching it for the very first time as well, of the artwork from Armin here. So enjoy the this little interview, a parody interview with Jose Mourinho. Jose Mourinho, has Canada contacted you?
I have nothing to say.
So they haven't contacted you?
Nothing. I have nothing to say.
Do you want the job?
Nothing to say. I have nothing to say.
Give me something here.
I have nothing to say. I'm so sorry, I have nothing to say.
Are you worried about your future?
No. Worried about what?
Yeah, that you'll never get a job again?
No.
Will it be Canada?
At all.
Mexico?
No.
Will you be in a tournament this summer coaching?
Nothing.
How about Portugal?
I cannot say.
All right, sure.
Thank you.
Well edited.
So I think Armin did a pretty funny joke there. But yeah, just to be clear, if you saw it on X, it was a joke. He was having some fun, and I quote tweeted him and said, guys, this is parody. So I didn't even know what he was cooking up in the kitchen. So he created that little Mourinho thing. I thought it was pretty funny. But everyone on X this morning knew that Mourinho didn't want the job, and I just thought it was funny that the article mentioned Mourinho, that he's already rejected it. The Ancelotti one, I would say, would be more realistic than Mourinho, but unfortunately, Mourinho is not coming to Canada, to everybody's shock. But Armin, that was pretty funny. So hopefully, if you saw it on X earlier, people didn't didn't think it was too funny. But yes, it was a joke. It was a joke from Armin, and you're getting my initial reaction to it. And it actually, Armin did a pretty good job. So moving on from that, though, we are going to move on now to the list itself. So when we looked at the original list of names that were dropped this morning, I had an immediate thought as well, and I know some others did. I looked at the list. It had Canada reaching out to them doesn't mean that, they're going to be interested, but they reached out. It was confirmed to Jose Mourinho. They reached out and it was confirmed to Bobby Smyrniotis. Talk about two of the most different managers there could ever be in the way that they play and where they are in their careers. So Alex, I have a big question for you when I looked at that list. What direction is the Federation going right now? Because like I said, these managers are just so different from one another. I can't tell you exactly what the national team is looking for, what type of manager they actually want to break in. Is it young? Is it experienced? Are they, are they familiar with the Canadian landscape? Are they not? What are they going for? Who is making these type of decisions? Are they qualified to do so? We know that we've heard some former players are sitting in with these interviews, which I think you have a bit of a theory or a reasoning behind this. But I know I wasn't the only one, and I saw a ton of tweets and people messaging me saying, like, where are we going with this? None of these coaches make any sense. There's no clear identity that this national team is going to. So, Alex, give me your reasoning beside why this net looks so big and the profiles of managers can be so different.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a bit of a concern at first glance, because I mean, this is about as random and as wild as if you're talking about statistics, right, and the variability, the R factor. So this R factor is about zero. There's zero correlation, it feels like, between any of these managers. It's like you got the young upstarts, guys just getting their feet wet in professional football, like Smyrniotis Jr. You got experienced assistants. You got guys who've already made that plunge in Europe as head coaches, like Marsh. You got Ole Gunnar Solskjaer somewhere in between. Then you look at the styles. You got guys who play 3-4-3s, 3-5-2s, 4-3-3s. Guys who park the bus, guys who don't park the bus. Like, there's just no rhyme or reason to it, and that's a bit of a concern, because I think something where, it's been mentioned, like someone like Kevin Blue comes in. He's obviously he brought a lot of experience, a lot of business acumen, but there's been questions of, all right, he's not a soccer guy. What does that mean in terms of the hiring of these guys? And you see a list like this, it's like there's no cohesion of what you want this Canadian team to be with the coach you bring in. But on the flip side, I think that could also be seen as a good thing, because of course, when you hire a manager, there's places where it's specific. Like, think Brighton. If De Zerbi was to leave tomorrow, I think Brighton would already have 5 candidates with a certain style, certain profile that they'd already be lining up to have interviews, the same way they did when Graham Potter was fired and De Zerbi was eventually brought in. Whereas for Canada, they're kind of in an in-between phase where they haven't really fully fleshed out their identity yet. I think we have an idea of where their strengths are, the speeds on the wings, some good attacking talent, what their midfield strengths are. But at the same time, there are different styles you could go within this. What I did find very interesting was something that Kristian Jack, our colleague, reported in this initial reporting you mentioned off the top. He said that something that Canada Soccer has done that they haven't really done in the past, and it's been a big gripe, I know, among former players. They don't really stay in contact too often with former players for anything in terms of board decisions, executive decisions. That's been something where a lot of players, I know Craig Forrest, for example, he's been someone very vocal saying, like, look, they know my phone number. Call me. I'm ready to help in any sort of capacity to do things. KJ reported that Canada Soccer has called some ex-CanMNT players. We don't know who they are. I'm sure we can speculate some of the ideas. I'd hope someone like a Craig Forrest is one of them. Atiba Hutchinson recently retired. Maybe he's someone they've contacted to help sit in and conduct these interviews. And I find that very interesting because, say if it's Atiba Hutchinson, for example, sitting in on that interview, he's an interesting perspective because he's been there for so long, but he's still connected to the front players. With Davies, and he's shared the field with them. By going through such a wide range of candidates and their personalities, you can kind of see what fits. All right, because in international football, personalities are so key, man management, because it's not always so much X and O's when you're dealing with the players for such little times of the year. You don't have times to sit down for 3 months, do a preseason where you're hashing in your way of playing a 3-4-3. You have so much less time, so it comes down to management. So interviews and personality are important. And then they can also kind of see what kind of shoes are fitting, right? If Hutchinson, for example, again, using him as a hypothetical, he's sitting there like, oh, I think Jesse Marsch, I can immediately see he's someone that will click with the Davies. Or he can be like, oh, this Clement guy, I see some, like, you can kind of, I think this is a scenario where they're kind of looking at a wide net just to see how it would fit. And I think it's really telling that they've invited some ex-players with connections to help put that together.
I think using Atiba Hutchinson is a no-brainer. This is someone who's been with the worst times with the national team to probably the best times with the national team, at least like, in the recent time. Like, he's had a very long Canadian career. He's seen it all. He's a voice that still probably has a good connections with the room right now and can speak to all the good and bad things that go on. I think, like you said, it'd be ridiculous not to utilize him to get his thoughts and opinions. And I hope that they are able to do that. Like you mentioned, Craig Forrest could be another great one as well. There's a ton of options out there, and they should tap into them, especially like it's well known Kevin Blue doesn't have the greatest understanding of the game. So to be able to lean on someone like that makes total sense. So now, and I just want to clarify too, that Tommy Wheeldon Jr. has been interviewed. We haven't talked about that yet, right, Alex?
Yeah, he's also on the list. Him and Bobby Smyrniotis. Just in the article this morning, they mentioned Smyrniotis, not Wheeldon Jr. It has been confirmed to us that also Wheeldon Jr. has been interviewed. It's also been reported out of Calgary as well. Some great reporters out there have put that out there. So Tommy Wheeldon Jr., Bobby Smyrniotis have also been interviewed. And from what it sounds like, the guys we mentioned of Karanka, Clement, Marsh, and Solskjaer have all been contacted / I think are planning to be interviewed, because of course Kristian Jack reported 4 international names. We now got 4 international names. You put 2 and 2 together. At least they haven't been interviewed. The plan is seemingly to interview them this week or next.
Now it's time to move on to, I think, our juiciest segment, and that is Jesse Marsch, because you and I, again, Alex, have been talking about this. We've been speculating about it. I've tried to pull all the strings I could to figure out if it was indeed Jesse Marsch. So now it's great that confirmation is out there and we can actually talk about it with certainty that he's a potential candidate for this job, whether, he wants the job, which was mentioned in the article that they're unsure of whether he has interest. I think it's interesting. We're going to watch a couple clips here from Football America. So shout out to Herc and Sebi for allowing us to use this clip over here. Go check them out. Herc's got a YouTube channel as well where I took the clip from, if you want to go check that out. But they talked about their opinions, and I think it's going to be really interesting to listen to because Jesse Marsch is American. He was up for that US job. He talked about wanting it. He lost out to Greg. He's starting beef with Greg a little bit right now, which I think will just lead to some top tier content here in CONCACAF between Canada and the United States. But right now, just here's a little clip for us to watch and break down. We have 2 clips from Football Americas. The first one is going to be talking about Jesse Marsch and the links to Canada, whether they think it's a fit or not.
Turk, what do you think? Jesse Marsch, is he the right call for Canada? And is Canada the right call for Jesse Marsch?
Just Jesse Marsch, because we can go anywhere we want with American, but
Yes.
He is the American available at this moment. Certainly with that pedigree, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better coach in probably their history.
Okay.
With just a resume. I kind of like this if it's Jesse Marsch for many reasons. I like this in the way that Jesse Marsch and his style may be conducive for the types of athletes that are so dynamic and technically sound that the Canadian national team has on their men's side. Alphonso Davies, Kyle Larin, Jonathan David, Richie Larea, Kone in the midfield. I mean, Tejan Buchanan. Like, there are some players that if you were to put these players in a system where they recover the ball with speed at a higher pace in front of the goal,
Right.
closer to goal, this could be a very difficult team to play against. That is the upside with Jesse Marsch. The downside with Jesse Marsch is also that resume you speak of. In some of those places, this style didn't go over well. In some of those places, this type of style for a certain type of player could be a detriment to their development, a detriment to the way they go about their business. But I kind of like this. I like this for Canada. I like this for Jesse Marsch.
I kind of like it too. It's a risk, and I want to go to and exactly what they were talking about. His style is very unique. It's the reason I didn't know if this was going to work, because it's that Red Bull philosophy. We've seen it work in his career well. Salzburg is probably the best example of that. We also see him take a big step over to Leipzig, and that's the one that worries me a little bit because he was handpicked and tailor-made for the Leipzig job, considering he was at New York Red Bulls. And then he went over to Salzburg. He climbed the ladder. He knows the system. He wasn't able to make it work. He then had a couple difficult spells as well in his career. I mean, I know talking with a couple CF Montreal fans that they weren't the biggest fans of his time there, but we can get back to that. And of course, what he did with Leeds. So I'm curious to know what you think, Alex. I think putting in that philosophy into a national team is very difficult. On the flip side, if you can make it work, and Hurt kind of talked about it, the athletes that we have and players that are great at pressing, Jonathan David, Kone, Buchanan, Davies can all press. You find a Schwanier into that lineup, all of a sudden, these maybe it leaves out a Kyle Aaron, but he can press too. I think Jonathan David is excellent when it comes to pressing, and I think that these players could suit what he wants to do. But I think no matter what, no matter which way you look at it, it's a risk given the way he wants to play. Do you think it could work, or do you think Jesse Marsch would have to, some way, shape, or form, change his philosophy and his style just for the international game, or he's going to have to do that regardless?
Yeah, I think there'll definitely have to be some adapting to do, no doubt. I think you kind of saw that at Leeds where, look, he had success in what his mission was year one, which is avoid relegation. He did that, and to his credit, he did so while playing a way that not a lot of relegation candidates do, and I think that's worth commending. But also, as we saw, they had so many injuries pile up. It's not always the most sustainable way to play when you're asking your players to run so much, press high, can be physically demanding, and especially in international soccer, it's tough because with the fixture load, what it is in world football now, it feels like players are playing way too much. It can be asked a lot to ask them, like, oh yeah, you're putting in 90s every week. Guys like, I think Alistair Johnson, right? This guy's putting in for Celtic 90 on Wednesday, 90 Saturday, 90 Wednesday, 90 Saturday to come into Canada. And you're like, oh yeah, you're going to press here too, right? Like, it's something where I wonder if that might be a bit too physically demanding, especially it's like, oh yeah, you're traveling from Glasgow all the way to some island somewhere in the CONCACAF region or somewhere for a game in Florida, California. It's not easy travel either. So I definitely think they'll have to adapt. But at the same time, I think there's, I just wanted to kind of touch on your point, Josh, as well, about his time at Leipzig. I also feel like that circumstance too, same with that Leeds where it didn't fully fit him. The Leipzig job, it felt like he got a very short leash there. He only lasted 17 games, I think, or 19 games, I think it was. He came at a very tough time for Leipzig, just in the sense they just lost Julian Nagelsmann, one of the best managers they've had, who went, I think, at that point he'd gone to Bayern, or was about to go to Bayern. Then they lost some key guys like Dio Upamecano, Ibrahima Konate, both left for 40+ million euros. Marcel Sabitzer went to Bayern Munich for a lot of money. They ended up getting rid of some other key pieces. Huang Hee-chan, his loan ended. They had some other key pieces. It was a bit of a transition period, and I found it so surprising they sacked him as quick as they did. I get it at one sense, because you go to a club like Leipzig, it's top four bust, and he was struggling to start. But it is worth noting that we haven't really got a whole lot of leash of him at the top level, because Salzburg, he dominated that league, did what he needed to do, check. Leipzig, he didn't really get a full season to see what he could have done over that. Okay, Leeds, again, when you're at a relegation club, the expectations, the style, the demands are so different than, say, if he was at, I don't know, name a club in the mid-table these days. So that's something to keep an eye on. So I don't know. I feel like that's the thing with Jesse Marsch. He's both proven and unproven. And the reality is we know his style. We know how he wants to play. But there are still some question marks of how it would fit at different levels.
And I think, picking up on that point, and then we're going to move on quickly, and we're going to have to think about it, Alex, because what we're going to do now is build what we think Jesse Marsch's perfect Canada starting 11 could look like. So I just brought up the website, and I guess I already have one saved in there. So just give a quick little thought about it. I just want to touch on that point, because I do think, you're playing one side and I'm playing the other, and I think it's fair both ways. I 100% agree with you that his time at Leeds United is hard to judge, because he came in, his style of football does not meet the requirements of a relegation-based Premier League club. I'm sorry, it doesn't. You need Sean Dyche. That is the type of manager you need to avoid relegation. Doesn't work. He did keep them up. Huge, a lot of love within Leeds. He always had that Ted Lasso hanging over his head, which because just when the series started coming out, they were unfairly treating him like, he didn't know what he was doing, but he saved them. Then he quickly got sacked. My biggest issue was with Leipzig, and I get what you're saying about, transition. But that's just kind of what the club Leipzig is. The amount of players that move on from Leipzig each season, it happens, and it always happens. Yeah, the managers who have done well there have always found a way to be able to lose out on players and bring players in. Openda is a perfect example of that. You see different players get shifted out and new ones coming in, and just the fact that that club was made to play his system, that he did it already at New York, he did it at Salzburg, he found success at Salzburg, and then they have Marco Rose in right now, who's another Red Bull prodigy who kind of came back and picked up the pieces of Leipzig and is doing really well. I'm not saying he got the fairest hand that he was dealt, but given how Leipzig is expected to do, he was very much underachieving, which is why he got sacked. Maybe it was unfair. Maybe that's just the one season where all the pieces didn't work. It's just there's been a lot of proof before of a lot of turnover at that club, but managers finding success.
Well, that's why it's kind of surprising, though, because if he had the success at Red Bulls, which, he did, I think he pushed for a couple supporter shields. I don't know if he ended up winning them in the end. He had the success at Salzburg. Then why not be patient with him, right? Like, because if it's that's where it's also the flip side of, was it too early? I think, again, no doubt it was reasonable from Leipzig's perspective to sack him. They ended up salvaging fourth that year.
And won the Pokal, I believe.
And they won the Pokal as well. So, they obviously made the right choice, no doubt. But it is something from Marsch's perspective where he's had the history of getting it done at Red Bulls and Salzburg. Of course, you can just counter it by saying, well, the jump up to Leipzig was too big of a jump for him. But again, we're just never going to know. So that's where I guess that kind of gray area is he as good as, or is he as quote unquote bad as his Leipzig stint, or is he as good as his Salzburg stint? Maybe the answer is somewhere in between, right?
And I like it. I like both points, and I'm here for the risk. I am looking at the options we've seen today. But Alex, just very, very quickly, we're not going to spend too much time on this. I just want to have a mental picture of what we think a proper Jesse Marsch team will do. So not too much discussion. We're going to go back and forth. So the system, it'll either have to be a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2. That is what Jesse Marsch is known for. I'm assuming, because I know you're leaning towards the 4-2-3-1. Is that what you would prefer under Jesse Marsch in this pressing system, or you want to go true Red Bull and go with that 4-4-2 or 4-2-2-2?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say let's go for a 4-2-3-1. Yeah, actually, we'll see, because basically I looked at his past stints at New York. He used a 4-2-3-1. At Salzburg, he used more of a 4-2-3-1. At Leipzig, he kind of did. I think it was a bit more of a 4-4-1-1. I think it ended up being. So there's obviously some flexibility within it. So I think what we should actually look at is more what fits Canada, because I think a 4-2-3-1 kind of could make sense off the bat. You have Eustachio Kone, who could be a double pivot, but then the question is, who's the 10? Do you trust Jonathan David to be that 10 long term? I think if you're wanting to play the pressing style that Marsch wants to play, let's be honest, that's Jonathan David's leading the line for that. He's such an incredible presser. He covers 12 kilometers per game. Agree. But then who's the number 10? Do you feel like it's Kone? Because it could be Kone, but we haven't really seen a whole lot of him there. I wonder if maybe something like a 4-2-2-2 could also end up making a bit more sense. Although then that leads to the big question we've had of Canada: is that a bit too light in the midfield?
It's funny because the 4-2-2 is true Red Bull, but it's a lot of what we've seen from this Canada side. And there's some question marks around can Jesse Marsch adapt? Excuse me. Take it away, Alex, for 2 seconds.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's the debate of what what does he feel fits this team and what fits his style. I think we should expect some sort of back four. So I think that's something, no surprise there. I think this will be good for what this Canadian team needs. But yeah, I think the question is, I, for example, wonder if it could be a 4-1-4-1. We haven't really seen Marsch play that, but I think that's something where you have that true six. You have that four, especially if, for example, Eustachio and Kone are in that four. Eustachio can press. We've seen it for Porto. He has no problem leading the press. Maybe that's sort of the scenario where, because of the lack of a true 10, because right now the true 10 options, I mentioned Kone, but he's more of an 8 at club, although he has the skills of a 10. He played there at the youth level. Osorio has been a 10, but we just haven't seen a whole lot of him to suggest he could be starting over some of the other names we've seen at the right now. Schwanier could play the 10, but he's still pushing to make the lineup. I do kind of like a 4-1-4-1. I don't know if you can tell me if you don't think Marsch would play that, but I think that's enough of a tweak on what he's played, but also what he has available within this Canadian team.
It's hard to know exactly what he'd do. I don't think it's out of like in terms of his style, a 4-1-4-1. I don't think it's it's crazy, especially if you have 2 8s that can press, like you mentioned. You have Jonathan David, one of the best options he could hope for up top. So let's just go for it right now. Have a little bit of fun with it. I'm assuming, and I think no matter what, unless we go that 4-2-2, like I don't know if we want that Laren David combo, but
well, I think even then, if you're going 4-2-2, it's interesting to know who the second striker would be, because again, that's the one thing where if we're talking about guys who are going to win and lose from Marsh getting hired, I'd be very curious to see where Kyle Laren fits under Marsh, because he is such a unique striker in the sense that his best games come when he just kind of gets to ghost around the pitch. I don't say that in a bad way. Like, I mean, that's Laren's strength of like kind of disappearing from coverage and then popping up in the box with goals, right? He's kind of like that false nine. And in a pressing system like this, there isn't always room for a false nine. There's room for guys who are willing to press, willing to push. If you're going to 4-2-2, who's that guy do you pair alongside David? Ugbo's been pressing a lot at Sheffield Wednesday. Maybe Ugbo's the guy. Could it be Theo Bear? Motherwell pressed decently as well, and Bear's certainly got a good athletic profile for something like that. Is it something unconventional where you just off the ball Liam Miller ends up pairing up front? He's got the speed, he's got the energy to press. That's kind of where my question is with the 4-2-2-2 is who's that second striker?
I think it's fair. I like your 4-1-4-1. I just think it's fun. I say let's go for it. That way there's no debate. It's Jonathan David up front. So Alex, back to front. Let's do this. So 4-1-4-1. We are gonna go with Crepeau, Johnson, Cornelius, Miller, Davies. Am I missing one? Is that or do you want Bombito maybe? I think that maybe makes more sense. And maybe take out Miller.
If you're wanting a bit of a high press, a team that's willing to play higher, I think as we mentioned last time we built one of these for the France friendly.
Yes.
That's Moise Bombito's music. He's fastest player in MLS this year. Can keep touting that until someone passes him. I think he definitely would fit in this sort of high press sort of system. So I guess really the question is from there, who fits alongside him most? Because Cornelius, I know at Malmö, they end up playing a lot aggressively because they're the top team in the league. They want to beat down teams in possession. So Cornelius has that comfort. So does Kamal Miller, to be fair. At Miami, remember those clips of him just making these crazy slide tackles because Miami were playing a 4 and they're essentially like, all right, in the final third, Busquets is going to push up, Alba's going to push up, Kamal, be ready to cover. So he does have some comfort in those sorts of high press systems. So maybe on paper,
Miller,
you could make an argument between Miller or Cornelius to pair alongside them.
I'd say Miller's faster. I think that helps a little bit with a higher line. I would lean. I prefer Cornelius. It just, I guess, obviously depends on the system, but I feel like Miller actually probably would fit Marsh's system a little bit better. We're going from Jesse's point of view. So do you agree? I do feel like it's probably Kamal.
Well, so I think if we're going for straight line pace, I think that's Miller. Bombito. Miller's got that good straight line pace. There have been more questions about how he handles on the turn, how he handles his agility, but there's no doubt he can jet. We've seen it sometimes. There's last year for Miami, Montreal, he's made some huge, Canada even, he's made some huge slide tackles. So I think if we're going at it from Marsh's perspective, I think that Bombito Miller back two, and I think Davies Johnson, yeah, I think that's also pretty reasonable. Although, yeah, I think that's reasonable because I do wonder, again, this is just me kind of thinking out loud, if there's a scenario where Jesse Marsch sees Alphonso Davies' speed and it's like that's someone who can really help us press.
I mean, if all it would take is for like an Atakubi or even a Richie to go at left back and then we push Davies up, which we could do. I think the biggest question mark then right now is who will go at left mid, assuming Buchanan sticks at right. You need someone who can press at left. Do you want to push Davies up? Do you want to try a Schaffelberg, a Liam Miller, who, like we've talked about, has had a great season? Schaffelberg is one of our favorites coming off the bench. Waterman will not be staying there at left wing. Which one would you prefer? I know Liam Miller can press. That's for sure. So can Schaff. They're both fast. They both have a ton of energy. I'm leaning a little bit more towards Liam just because I like Schaffelberg on the bench.
I think Miller's just the one where he's started enough for Canada. He's starting at a good level in the championship. Schaffelberg right now, and again, this is the asset of Schaffelberg. You know you can have him as a super sub, And that's an asset, right? Because some guys, you don't always know how they're going to react off the bench. So there's no problem of keeping a Schaffelberg as a super sub role and growing from there. So I'd say probably you put Miller on the left because he's got the speed. He's been playing wing back for Preston, so he's got the fitness, right? It's a lot of physical demands to be playing up and down that side. So I think that's a reasonable shout to go Miller within if you're putting Davies at left back. But then there's of course the question of could there be a scenario where Davies ends up playing a little higher up to press, of course.
Yeah, and like Armin said here, we could that could easily be an option as well. Larea, Atakubi at left back, Davies up at left wing. I think the biggest question mark maybe is now the midfield. I mean, we said Eustachio, Kone, they're locks. Is it Choinière? Is it Ahmed? I think those are the only two. Osorio does not fit this type of system whatsoever. I would say in terms of pressing, it's Choinière, but
That's it, because Choinière, for those who are unfamiliar, I think he's like something like the back-to-back reigning beep test champion in Montreal. Like every year preseason, there's just like, oh, they're doing beep test today, and then about half an hour later on Twitter, they're like, oh, yep, they're Choinière won again. So if we're talking fitness, he's up. He'd probably be one of the choices. Of course,
Ahmed, your boy.
Ali Ahmed, no doubt as well. He's played a lot of wing back. He's played midfield. He's got the fitness. I think that one, it's honestly between those two, because I think it's something where Osorio, just the legs to be pressing. You kind of see it with TFC. He ends up playing a little more deep when they're pressing, just because he doesn't have the legs to be pushing around as much up front. But yeah, I'd say those two, unless again, there's always that option where if you believe you want Eustachio higher up the pitch, because that's one thing. Eustachio is a very fit guy, although maybe he's not playing as much now. You could also have the scenario where it's Piet with Eustachio and Kone in front. But I like this Eustachio, Kone, Choinière. I think that kind of screams a mix of quality midfield control, but then you got the just absolute stamina and physical capacity of a Choinière.
All right, and just last little note here on the starting 11. I mean, if you really want to make it look like a 4-2-3-1, you could drop Choinière or Kone, make it like a 4-2-3-1 there. This could also be Piet, like Alex mentioned, for a true double pivot with Kone up. You can move Davies to left mid. Left
Ahmed
wing.
on the wing too, because like you mentioned, he's been playing there for the Whitecaps. So there's that scenario.
Ahmed could go in there as well. We could have Larea or Atakubi at left back. Or if you really want to do the 4-2-2 or 4-4-2, then more than likely Choinière would become Larin. You'd have David Larin up front, your two wide players, Eustachio, kind of Kone in there. Or
I wonder again if there's a scenario where David Buchanan could be if you want Jesse Marsh pressing, or you put those two up front. Buchanan has played striker with with David before. You can put either, for example, you could put Choinière and Ahmed as the two kind of 10s, kind of guys you can press and play in between. Like there's real flexibility, I think, within this group, but I think we have a kind of core idea of it's going to be Kone, Eustachio, David, and Buchanan are going to kind of be the key pieces of Marsh ball. You know, guys who can run, guys who can get up the pitch, guys who can combine. Really, the bigger question marks are who ends up joining them up front, and also the back line. Because I do want to just shout out a comment that was there earlier from Irv Blitzer. Scott Kennedy is someone also to keep an eye on if we're talking pace. He is probably he's Bombito level speed, but unfortunately he's not played very much this year in Austria due to injuries. But if he gets healthy, you can very much throw him in the mix. If we're talking athletes who can get up down the field with speed, Kennedy ticks that box.
He does. It just like you mentioned, he's not had a great season. He's not been able to really stay healthy. I would still probably rather go with the other two, but when he was fully fit and if he can get his form back, then he is definitely in the mix. But now we're going to move on to the rivalry section. This is our final clip from Football Americas. Seb and Herker kind of talking about the rivalry between Berhalter and Marsh, as well as Canada and the States. So check it out.
The U.S. men's national team is an objective of Jesse Marsh, not because I think it is or you think it is, because Jesse Marsh himself has put it out there. He has put that out there. And in some way, shape, or form, he has made a nemesis out of Greg Berhalter. This would be great TV for us.
So there is kind of a previous history here. Obviously, Jesse Marsh kind of started his coaching career with Montreal. And when he was out of a job there, apparently he tried to get either an interview or a conversation with CSA. They said no, but he had a plan, apparently, like, in mind for what he would do with Canada. This is, at this point, 12 years ago. So this is something that's been at least, I think, on his radar for a long time. But you mentioned the U.S. job. I think, based on kind of some of the coverage I've seen come out of Canada, there's at least some people in Canada that wouldn't want an American as their head coach, right? Rivalry, we get it. You just said it would be great for the rivalry. What about from a U.S. perspective? If he takes the Canada job, does that hurt his future U.S. candidacy?
No, I mean,
No?
history has shown us it wouldn't.
You don't think U.S. fans would raise an eyebrow and would say,
Let me just.
what if Jesse Marsch beats the U.S.? Like, what if he does what Berhalter did to Mexico?
I think that increases his opportunity of actually getting the job as to where Jesse Marsch is today. I think Jesse Marsch having the Canadian national team job would only help his chances. Could only help his chances. I don't see Jesse being in the picture today. I think some fans have lost interest in a Jesse Marsch because of the leads, because of how that
U.S.
went.
fans, you're saying, as far as like a national team manager.
As far as a national team manager, whereas you can only increase your stock if you do well against the U.S. men's national team, if you do well in Copa America as the Canadian national team coach, against the likes of Argentina, against the likes of Peru, against Chile, et cetera, et cetera. If you do well in that setup and make a run, that's when fans are going to say, this could have been for the U.S. That's when fans are going to say, we missed out. Not by taking the Canada job. I think right now you're already out anyways.
You know what's crazy? He's been out of work for 14 months.
Yeah, I've seen these things like, why would Jesse Marsch want to pay cut? Because you're not getting paid at the moment to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, at some point as a manager, like big name guys can take 14 months off.
Yeah.
Jesse Marsch is clearly a good coach and has a resume, but 14 months, like you're out of the limelight for a long time. Yeah. You know how that is.
All right, we have Arm in the background. He's going to join us in a couple seconds here. But Alex, I just quickly want to talk about what the 2 points from that. One, does it bother you if the next manager is American? For me, no. But the second point, I think it's interesting. Would you have any issues with Jesse Marsch maybe using this as an opportunity to, grow his career, aiming for the U.S. job? And I think I've listened to that clip a few different times now, and I didn't really catch that until right now, but I feel like that would maybe rub me a little bit more the wrong way. If Jesse's going into this job with, just the pure objective, which he probably will, to do the best he possibly can, but nothing really on the U.S., just nothing. I want to beat the U.S. I want to beat Greg for no other reason than I want to beat them and help this program move on. Instead of going into it being like, I want that job. I want to use this job to be able to show them this is what you're missing out on. And that's kind of what they were talking about. And I've seen some split opinions on Jesse Marsch, just in general, over tactics, over the fact that he's American. But what are your thoughts? One, does it bug you that he's American? And two, do you think that he would use this to try to go for the U.S. job? Or do you not think that's an issue at all? And should fans be concerned about that?
That's a loaded question.
I know. I'm sorry. I caught it there the second time when I was listening to it. I'm like, okay. So yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. No. It's a loaded question. But I think as long as he has the right intentions, I could care less where the manager comes from. I think it's something where you just get the best manager for the job, whatever that looks like. And if you think Marsh is your person, your guy, no problem with him being American or whatever else. I think I think that's interesting though. Like he's obviously clearly so wanted the U.S. job. He was really pushing for it when it looked like Berhalter might be on the way out, where you wonder where his head's at. But I think what's interesting is that Marsh has that connection to Canada, that he's coached in Montreal before, and that of course a decade ago he submitted a very detailed resume, a very detailed plan to want to coach Canada and to make things he had interest. He obviously didn't get an interview, they went elsewhere, but I think it's interesting that he's also had that past experience. So I'd say no. I think he appears to have someone with the right intentions, and look, there's no problem with him using a job like this to angle for something better down the line. And I think it's natural for him to want to coach the U.S. He's American. The U.S. is on the rise. I think it would be a great, whoever, like, again, this U.S. team feels like on paper within the next 10 years, they could push to a World Cup semifinal. Like, that's not unrealistic. Whoever manager ends up being is going to look pretty darn good. Of course, if you're Marsh, why not be that guy as an American? But, also, I do wonder if I think as long as Marsh for now, if it's Canada, Europe, then to the U.S., I think people would understand. I think as long as it's not he does his Canada job, does it a couple of years and goes straight to the U.S., I think that would really rub things along the wrong way. But from what we know about Marsh in his past, I don't expect him to do that.
And just to wrap up the Jesse Marsch section, if you want my opinion, one, I don't care if he's American at all. And I think the fact that he's beefing with Greg makes it even better, and it makes me want him to come here. And like Alex said, there's no reason to think that he even has his eyes on the US job. I don't know if it was in that clip, I can't even remember now, but it was definitely part of that Football America show where Herc mentioned the fact that he's basically out of the running, and US fans don't really look at Jesse Marsch as an option, really short-term or long-term for the national team. And on top of that, like Alex just mentioned, there is history of Jesse Marsch wanting this job, having ideas of taking this program to the next level. And the fact that he wanted the job back in 2012, and imagine what our program looked like all the way back in 2012. If he gets it now with the talent pool that we have, I'm sure he's thinking that I can do something pretty special here. So I don't think there's anything in there. I just saw like a lot of comments about it. I thought Herc and Seb made some pretty good points about it, but I would say, and I hope from the most part, and even looking at the comments here, that no one cares. As long as he comes in with the right attitude, the right ideas, it doesn't matter if he's American. And I just think it's even funny that he's beefing with the US coach. I love it. Bring on Jesse Marsch. I think that out of the candidates we've talked about today, Alex, I know there's risk, but he's my favorite. I think, like we said, that I love that there's history back to 2012 leading to it. I know he hasn't had the most success in his last couple of jobs, but I think it's an intriguing name with some good ideas and can do something special here. And I hope we get him in before, whoever we get in before the Copa America, so they can have 2 major tournaments. Alex, quickly, out of all those names you saw today, who's your favorite? And then we're going to bring in Armin because he's got a question that he's been sitting on for a little bit now that he's very excited to ask. So, Alex, who's your guy?
If I'm going to pick one, just one, no other factors, I think it's probably Marsh.
Marsh.
I think just as like a singular manager, there's enough experience, familiarity with CONCACAF, familiar with these group of players, still young, brand of football. I think he ticks the most boxes because I like a lot of what the other guys have in this mix, like a Solskjaer, for example. There's enough intriguing at his United stint where I'd be like, okay, you hire him, like, okay, I could see him giving him a shot, but also there's a lot of unknown. Did it with Clement, Karanka. They've such great assistants, but they haven't made that plunge of an assistant. You could argue, okay, well, Marsh went as a head coach and he fell, but he fell again. His lead stint wasn't really a failure. He kept the team up, like we mentioned, wasn't a fit. And even Leipzig, you could argue, has a short leash. I think that he ticks the most boxes in terms of experience and all that. So if I were to pick one, I'd go Marsh. Yeah,
I mean, with the Leeds, no one was saving that team, and none of the coaches they brought in that season really did too much. So you can't really leave that on Jesse. But Armin, pop on in. Armin had a question that he's excited to ask about, and just give you guys a little detail about it. It's basically around the assistant Canada job. Bobby Smyrniotis, Tommy Wilden Jr., Mauro Biello. I'll let Armin get into it, but basically the question he brought up to me this morning, and I'll let you elaborate on a little bit more, Armin, is it more important right now to get one of these guys in as an assistant coach over the importance of bringing in the actual head coach? It seems like a wild statement, and when you got me this morning, I like when I thought about it, I know where you're going with it, but I want you just to give some background around why you think it's so important to get one of these young, talented coaches in, just in the back, like the background, not being the head guy, the assistant. And then I'm curious to get Alex's take on it as well. So just run us through your point here, Armin. We can't hear you. Sorry, one sec.
Yeah, you got me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, perfect. See, I don't do the on-screen stuff too much. I'm not good at this, but this one question I've been pondering a little bit, so I figured I'd share it on chat. Chat, obviously, let me know if I'm dumb. A couple days ago, I tweeted this out. And I mean, it was meant to be, a little tongue-in-cheek, but then it got me thinking about the role of the assistant coach, the role of coaching staffs, and the long to short-term future of the Canadian men's national team. And I think the primary part of my theory is that in a transitionary period, because John Herdman's era was so clearly defined, like a strong start, like a big storyline, and like a very abrupt end. So I feel like the next manager that comes in has this like looming timeline of Copa America, World Cup. You've got this 2-year period of time where you really have to get all of your success right away. Like, it's not even just a matter of like, what's your long-term vision? It's like, how quickly can you get us results? And when you're building a program, the way Canada Soccer is trying to build and completely reorganizing its front office structure and all of these moving pieces, I think the thing that you don't want to lose in this is the consistency, that bridge between the past, the future, the present, like all these different spheres to balance. And so the names Bobby Smyrniotis and Tommy Wilding Jr. keep coming up, and I think people dismiss them because of their pedigree. They say, well, they're Canadian Premier League managers, so they're not of that level yet. And we need someone who can win right now. Like, we can't trust the fate of a Copa America and a World Cup to, an unproven international manager like Bobby Smyrniotis. But then you look at Bobby Smyrniotis' history. And I'm using Bobby because I think Bobby has more of like a connection to this team as opposed to Tommy, but I think either could do this role well. So I'll give Tommy his credit as well. But when you look at Bobby's like pedigree developing these players, like he would be walking into a national team environment where he immediately has the respect of a couple of people directly, but of the entire locker room indirectly in some way. And then you add on to this the idea that like you need a bridge, someone who understands Canada Soccer specific problems, Canada Soccer specific, challenges and the way that the entire organization is structured, as well as the development paths. That's why I agree with you guys. I think Jesse Marsch is the right kind of direction, because he's a good bridge between the international with the MLS ideas, with just like knowing domestic soccer. So here's I'll get to the point of my theory. I think that the actual big hire here is convincing Bobby Smyrniotis to take on the assistant manager position underneath one of Jesse Marsch or Paul Clement or Aitor Karanka or whoever they end up hiring. And I think the idea is that by being the assistant, Bobby Smyrniotis can do a couple things. One, he can take on the mantle of learning what it is to be an international manager without the actual pressure that comes with being a results-focused face of the organization or face of the team. And so with a guy like Bobby, you really want him to have some time to stew and to percolate on ideas and maybe see where his shortcomings are personally as a manager, maybe grow in those areas, learn from someone experienced, someone who's got, from the school of Ancelotti or Mourinho. And then I think that eventually when you get, let's say, through the World Cup, then you say, okay, is Bobby ready? Is Bobby the guy who's going to take this program on as a longer term project, as opposed to being so hampered in the short term kind of need for results? So I'll ask you, and I'll send it to Alex obviously first. What do you think about the idea of the importance that Canada Soccer is putting on the assistant coach, whether it's Bobby, whether it's Tommy, or whether it's even Mauro Biello? Do you think that that's another area that these guys have to get right?
I think the interesting thing about the assistant coach would be whether you can get the head coach on board. Like if you're looking to bring in Jesse Marsch, I think Jesse Marsch will have his guys, or whoever will have his guys to come in. I don't hate the idea of having a Biello, a Bobby, a Tommy in the room. I just don't know how realistic it would be for them to be able to make that happen, because I don't know how many cases it is like that where a manager would come in, but usually they come in with the entire back room staff. Yep. But like you said, like if it's someone completely new to the program, like I think Jesse's got enough in his locker where he understands kind of what he's getting into. But if it was someone, and I don't even know, like someone, from Europe who's gotten really no idea about the landscape over here, I think having someone to, in one way, shape, or form, to be a part of that could be a good idea. And Bobby, I think, would be excellent at it. I also don't know if going to these, and this is my biggest one, and I think I've asked Alex this before as well, but like I don't know if Bobby or Tommy would look at the assistant coach job at Canada and would prefer that over what they're doing right now in the Canadian Premier League. And I'm curious. Yeah. I don't know the answer. Maybe they would jump at the opportunity to be an assistant over where they are, but they're both, well-established managers in the Canadian Premier League. They seem very comfortable. I think Bobby maybe would have jumped at the head coaching role. I mean, clearly both are interviewing for it. I don't know about the assistant. It's a very interesting idea. My biggest issue then, my biggest concern would be what if you're telling Jesse, hey Jesse, we want you to have Bobby or Tommy in your team, and he's like, I don't want those guys. Like, I have the guys I trust. That's like where I think maybe that would kind of break down. But which is why I think you need someone with vision and direction, and the idea being that if you look at the role of an assistant coach, it is to literally assist the main coach, the head coach. But there is an element of the assistant coach is the guy the players turn to when things are tough, and the manager needs to be the bad cop. He can be the good cop. And I think giving the assistant coach, granted, you can't force someone to hire someone on their staff if they don't want, but I think someone with vision at the top of the pyramid here, if they can lay out the vision of hey, it's important to us that we have a bridge between our soccer scene and your ideas, then
that's why I mean it would be a big get if they can convince both the manager and Bobby Smyrniotis that this is something that might work. It's just an idea. Maybe I'm trying to force the Jesse Marsch and the bearded assistant a little bit too much. But
well, let's get Alex's take. That's just mine. Like I said, that's just one area where
Louis is also saying Bobby is not good cop. Even as I said it, I was like, yeah, that might be a little tricky, but
he's definitely he can tear the paint off of a locker room if he needs to. But I think it is important. I think it's important because I think there's a few things you see in international soccer. Why is it that typically managers who come from a domestic country tend to have success? Because they know all the socioeconomical, the political, the footballing scene. I love the example that keeps getting brought up, right? Walid Regraoui, the Morocco coach. He's come in, he brought them to a World Cup semifinal. His resume was coaching 2 different stints in the Moroccan League and a stint in Qatar. No doubt the Moroccan League's very good. I will not dismiss that whatsoever. They won. I think he won a African Champions League, another very important competition. I don't think that's fair to Moroccan football to compare that to a CPL, a brand new league, whatnot. But that's something where I think if you look at that resume and you put up Regraoui's resume pre-Morocco and you're putting it up against some of these candidates here, like a Marsh and whatnot, he's not someone who stands out. But there's the factor that in international soccer, all of those above-mentioned factors plays in. And look at this recent Asian Cup, for example, the whole controversy around Jurgen Klinsmann and his stint in Korea, where he took this Korean job. He didn't really have much familiarity with the K-League. He kind of had a bit of a separation between his knowledge of the K-League, his staff. Didn't even really spend that much time in Korea. It was huge controversy. They didn't go as far as expected. His tenure ended. Huge. It was very fascinating drama to follow along, and it shows the importance of when you're in international soccer of knowing of having that knowledge of what you're getting into. And that's where I think as a coach heading into this, you'd be very wise to call whatever is the top dog in this region. And if you're talking about Canadian coaches coaching in Canada, Bobby Smyrniotis and Tommy Wheeldon are near the top of the list. So I do agree in the sense that, okay, if the guy ends up being a Marsh, let him bring his stuff, right? Let him bring whoever guys he's picked up over his time in Germany and Austria, MLS, wherever, Leeds. Like, he's obviously picked up some guys. Maybe he won't call Chris Armas, though. I'll just to throw that out there. Probably not one he'll be calling. But bring in your staff, no doubt, as a coach. But I think when you're hitting international soccer, this isn't club where there's less of those. Of course, there's distinct differences. Like coaches who coach in Serie A are going to have differences that coach in La Liga, but it's not as different. At the end of the day, it's all kind of very similar. International soccer, it's so different, especially the Canadian landscape. Anyone who's worked here will tell you it's so different from how the CSA, from the actual player development, etc. I do think there's value in having a top guy in a Wheeldon, Junior, Smyrniotis be there to help. I think the bigger question, like Josh mentioned, would they take it? I think there is some appeal because if you're an assistant on a Canadian team that's about to go to Copa America, about to head to the World Cup, the staff will get its due if Canada does well. All of the staff. Marsh, if he's the head coach, whoever his assistant, fancy assistants he brings from elsewhere, and if he hires Wheeldon Jr. or Smyrniotis, I think this could be a bit of a stepping stone. And again, it's something I called back to on our last stream about Jim Curtin in the U.S., mentioning Jim Curtin's a top U.S. coach. He's someone who could easily have interest from elsewhere, from Europe. What he does with those union teams on shoestring budgets is remarkable, making MLS Cup finals, Champions Cup and all that. And he mentioned, he's like, look, if the U.S. called me tomorrow to be an assistant, I'd do it. It's a World Cup. This is a huge opportunity. If Curtin's saying that, I'd have to imagine Smyrniotis and Wheeldon Jr. would be easily enticed in the right scenario, of course. And I think, again, it goes to the point of, do these coaches actually want to bring them on? I don't know, but I think if you're bringing an outside voice, it's very, very important to have that inside perspective, because there's a reason why no manager has never won a men's World Cup without being from the country they manage. It helps to know what you're getting into.
It seems like
absolutely
the answer, sort of like, it seems like probably they're interested. I can't fully say, but like Alex said, probably they're interested in even the assistant job. It's just whether or not they're given that opportunity by whoever is brought in. And the fact that it's a Copa America and a World Cup, they should want that job. Like they should want to, like Bobby and Tommy should want to be a part of this national team, because these are two massive tournaments. And there's a home co-hosted World Cup plus a Copa America for the first time ever. You want to be a part of that. That is history in the making. And well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But it was a very interesting question you had this morning, Armin. You called me. You're excited about it. So I think you got, maybe the answer you were looking for. I'm not sure.
Yeah, someone said L take, so I'm just gonna assume I'm wrong, which is fine. I mean, sorry. Dimitri says just hire Alex. I think that's also like put him in the school of Peter Galindo and just be like, all right.
Figure things
Shout
out.
outs to Peter at TFC.
Shout out. I'll talk about the socio and political economic factors. That's where my university degree comes in handy, I suppose.
Brilliant.
There you go. All right. Well, it was a good question to end on. Alex is up for the assistant coaching job now, so we'll see if it.
Did we talk about who we wanted? Who was your number one picks?
I think I said Marsh. Alex said Marsh. I don't know if you want to.
Marsh. Are we all in agreement?
Yeah. Well, actually, just also as I mentioned, we forgot to mention. I think it's important also to round off. Don't discount the role Mauro Biello could play in this assistant talk. If it isn't a Wheeldon Jr., if it isn't a Smyrniotis, if you're talking about guys who are familiar with this program, familiar with the landscape, also speaks French. You can't forget that a good chunk of this national team, come from that our francophone, your potential starting goalkeeper, Kone in the midfield, someone like Biello as well. You can't forget that. Okay, if it isn't Smyrniotis, if it isn't Wheeldon Jr., I'd be very curious to see how Mauro Biello feels about this. I think it might be something where he got a taste of a head coaching job and he might wonder, okay, maybe I give him my shot in the CPL, for example. If Quebec gets a team next year, he'd be a brilliant candidate. Of course, if a Wheeldon Jr. or if a Smyrniotis leaves, that opens up a job. Maybe someone gets sacked. But I think also Mauro Biello is someone who could also be an asset to a Jesse Marsh staff or one of the other.
You guys want to hear something funny? I believe if my research is correct, Biello took over as the assistant coach for Montreal so Jesse was the manager at Montreal at 2011, 2012, and then Biello came in. I don't think there's any overlap. He came in 2012. Maybe there is. I don't know. I'd like to know that. Imagine if Biello was the assistant to Jesse Marsh. I think that they just missed out. But I don't know if Alex, you're usually good at this. I don't know. That'd be hilarious. Imagine that, Jesse Marsh.
I'll have a look, but hey, that'd be a funny connection.
It was close. It's either he just left as one arrived or they just overlapped.
Because Jesse Marsh, he ended up coaching at CF Montreal, or Montreal Impact 2011-2012. And meanwhile, Mauro Biello, he ended up, I think they just underlapped because his coaching
probably
career,
shook hands a couple times and then
he joined the staff in 2009. Biello did, so he was in the staff while Marsh was there. I don't know if he was the assistant, but he was in the staff. So there is a bit of familiarity where there's a scenario where Marsh could be your head coach and Biello could be a staff member who knows Marsh and brings all that Canadian experience that could be useful as an assistant coach.
Chat's saying Jenkins for head coach, Wheels is assistant, Josh is assistant, Alex is head coach.
Just OneSoccer ends up coaching the national team.
Dude, if you really want to get grouped at both Copa and the World Cup, hire OneSoccer as the coaching staff because we can talk soccer, but I don't know. I feel like that's too tall a mountain to climb.
It'll be a quick 0-3 on the way out, but no, but I think that's fascinating. I think that makes it even more fascinating, Armin, the point you brought up without even knowing that Biello could be a reserve water player.
No, they only drink in Prime. That's it. New sponsor, Prime Energy Drink. That's it.
Such a stray for that. Jeez, no love for tactical assistant video. No,
I know.
Water boy.
My goodness.
Cleaning boots and making sure they're all shined properly.
All right, we're gonna set this right here quickly.
Oh, he said just kidding. Cool.
Yeah, but no.
Hey man, honestly, if it no joke, if Canada Soccer sent me an email saying, "Hey, we need a water boy for the World Cup," I'm doing it. I don't care. I don't have that kind of ego. Yeah, that's sick. You get to be around the team. You have no responsibility basically besides hydrate the players. Who's gonna get upset at you?
Yeah, let's get our boy.
It's
Adam
It's basically a free World Cup.
Yeah,
my water's too cold. I can't run at my top speed when my water's too cold. No more ice cubes.
I didn't say I was going to be a good water boy.
No, let's just get out the old resume, send it over to Canada Soccer if they need a water boy.
Yeah, Canada Soccer. If you actually need a water boy, I'm down. Let's do this. But you got to pay for like all the expenses, the hotel, the flights, everything.
Yeah, that's part of the deal. So Marsh will be the head coach. Biello will slide back into his assistant role. They overlapped. Important Waterboy Armin will be there, and it'll be a good time. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Unless I beat him out too. I need to get my resume back out. But yeah. No.
Hey, Josh, we have good experience from our World Cup sims, right? We did a decent job as co-managers.
Yeah, I still can't believe you guys simmed that thing 1,000 times. That was insane.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot of. It was a lot. The markers, the paper. That was a. Hey, it did very good. We're kind of rambling here, but that video got like 20,000 views. So I was pretty. It was time well spent. But all right.
Alex, do we have any shows to promo? I think we have another episode of our French show coming up next week. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it, but I think it's actually I've been practicing. It's Le Bouclier Canadien.
Close.
Better. The first time was brutal, so I feel like I'm at least getting some I'm getting closer.
Yeah,
I think we have. Who do we have? We have Halifax. We have Halifax and St. Laurent players lined up for episode 2.
Let's say we got a Canadian Championship themed episode 2 of Le Bouclier Canadien. Should be some good interviews there. Josh and I just did a fun CPL related interview. It's going to be fun to put together. We had some great personalities from these guys, and they had some fun questions. So some good interviews coming up, French and English. So if you understand both, if you want one or the other, if you want a bit more Canadian Championship CPL, those will definitely be worth tucking into over the weekend and next week.
You want to get a shout out?
Do we have any other news from today? Wrexham, we got Wrexham versus Whitecaps.
I don't know if you guys watch.
It only took them 5 years.
I don't know if you guys watch Welcome to Wrexham or not. I've watched them all. It is hilarious. It's excellent. It's so popular in the US that it's not even funny. I don't have the stats over here, but the amount of interest that Wrexham has and the amount it's showed over in the US for being in the 4th division is wild. Ryan Reynolds is a very handsome man, and he's bringing him to his hometown. So I don't know. It'll be cool. Alex, you gonna go to that game?
I mean, if I'm around, I think why not? I think it'll be a cool novelty of seeing Wrexham in town. I think it's a cool idea. I think it's something where, look, the reality is these documentary series like A Welcome to Wrexham or like Sunderland Till I Die, this is a way of people are tapped into Netflix. There are others, of course, Disney, this one was on. People notice these shows, they watch it, they get into soccer. It's a pretty cool intersection of what they've seen on TV, this great story, Wrexham, with their local club, right? The Whitecaps in a scenario. So I think it's a cool way to bridge the fact that fans might have gotten into soccer because of these stories, and then for them a chance to see that while blending in the fact they've got a hometown team who, may I remind you, is doing pretty darn good in MLS play right now, is pushing for trophies. So it's a nice mix, although hopefully those ticket prices go down. That was a bit of a gripe. I know fans will want to go check that out.
They're in League One now, right?
Yeah, they just got promoted
again. Yeah, so like League One, I feel like advantage Whitecaps for that one, no?
I would say
as
so.
As far as result goes?
So. I mean, I don't think they'll put out a full strength lineup. I mean, it's around Leagues Cup, so it depends how seriously they're taking Leagues Cup.
I'd be curious to see if Ryan Reynolds has any interest in sightseeing and maybe visiting Vancouver FC or Pacific FC as well while he's there. I mean, if you're thinking about the level of play, I'm sure CPL players could translate very easily over to League One. I don't think it's that big a jump, right? And also, if you're talking about building a club with storylines.
David Norman Jr., Vancouver FC center back, who may or may not have been one of the guys we talked to recently. He played for Northampton last year, League 2, got them promoted to League 1. So he has that experience. And there's a lot of complaints in the Northampton fan base that he wasn't kept around. They felt he was League 1 quality. So that's someone who's made that, or could have made that jump before.
And I think the schedule is Bournemouth,
Jr.,
Chelsea, Whitecaps. So quite the you got a lower end, I'd say. Maybe it's not fair. Mid-table Premier League club to Chelsea, who again is a mid-table Premier League club, all the way over to the Whitecaps. It'll be quite the little West Coast tour for Wrexham. Pretty excited though.
If we had to recommend one CPL player to Ryan Reynolds, who would you guys recommend?
A CPL player for
Like you're doing all the scouting for him. He's just showing up and being like, "All right, I'll sign one of your players." And chat, get in on this too. I want to know who you guys pick.
I'd probably go for a Canadian because I think it would be cool to get a Canadian on Wrexham, get that connection. Oh boy, that's a good question. I mean, maybe like
Poku, maybe.
Well, yeah, like a youngster making the step up.
Like
a Noah Batney, for example.
Because here's the other thing: there's like no pressure, but like the player you pick is going to be on, like he's going to be a character on a TV show as well. So you have to keep that in mind too. Can't just be a good player. He's also got to be like a good personality.
Who's a youngster we've interviewed, Alex, that has got personality?
I mean, hey, Lucas Diaz was a fun interview when we talked to him.
He was
a few months ago, and he showed some good personality. He's obviously. On the younger side. Also, I mean, hey, you're going over to Pacific. Emil Gazdov, Paul Adamadume, those are a couple of guys, youngsters there that have got good personalities. Gazdov, too, he's been known to rile up the crowd a few times. So he's kind of got that antagonistic nature you need to thrive in the English and UK pyramid.
I'm trying to think.
I'm going to give a shout out to Marco Carducci, who I think would be like the perfect good Canadian boy, charitable, like always got a smile on his face, personable, and then also doesn't have to play that many games. So there's like no chance of like a viral clip going bad. So
Dom Samuel.
That would be my Dom Samuel would be great. Yeah. I'm down.
Thiago Coimbra.
Still, I think if you're going to put your I think if you're gonna put your best foot forward, though, you got to send over like a Tristan Borges or someone who's just guaranteed like to give you goals and assists.
And he's 25. He's got great personality. He's in the form, getting back to that excellent form that we used to know him. That's not a bad shout. I think Borges was. I don't know. He did the European one. I was just trying to think of like a youngster, like a 21-year-old kind of thing, like full of talent, ready to go.
But I like the Kwasi Poku shout though.
Kind of where I was leaning. But
I think any young guy with personality, because that's what you mentioned for the TV show, but even just playing in
Sean Young, sorry, Alex.
Yeah, well,
there you go. 20. I know he just got a new deal, but 22. 100
certainly built to play in England, in the UK.
They're
Wales.
They're gonna sign like 6 or 7 players. So you had to keep some of them a secret.
Say, Ryan, you can save some money here and get some players no one knows about, and they can pop off.
TJ Tahid, that's a great shout.
He'll be,
James Cameron, he's got the UK passport.
James Cameron, that's the answer. That's the correct answer. James
That's
Cameron is the correct answer.
He has the UK passport.
James Cameron.
Paperwork's easy.
Okay, so Ryan, if you're in chat, if Ryan Reynolds is in chat right now, James Cameron, that's the one we decided on. So
I like it.
Or Josh Deming. I co-sign that.
Josh Deming.
Yeah. Hey, got some
pretty good career.
He's got some college experience. He did fine. It's more better.
Right, we'll wrap up with this one. Can we get Ryan Gauld's application fast tracked? So Alex, give us the latest on this, because I think this comes up like once a year. Every time the Whitecaps are doing well or Ryan Gauld does well. So the last time we had him on, I think he said it would be 2026, but after the World Cup, right?
He didn't give us a deadline. He told us that he's interested. I think Alex.
Or that's what we found out after.
Yeah.
It's basically like. Yeah, with Gauld, it's because paperwork, it's around 5 years you have to have lived in the country. So for Gauld, he arrived in 2021. So 22, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the 5th year. So it's somewhere in 26. And it really only depends when they count him as moving next. Technically, he moved in July, which would be after the 2026 World Cup. So it depends if they could fast track them. So right now, basically anyone who's eligible to make a switch is anyone who's arrived to Canada in 2019. That's where we're at, because that was 5 years ago. So guys like Achinoti Janssen could be eligible to become Canadian. And then next year, guys like, I think Dan Klomp is getting close to hitting his 5 years in Canada. A few other names. But yeah, Ryan Gauld, it would be 2026. The good news is it doesn't look like Scotland will call him up by then. So maybe there's a scenario, but it would have to be right around the
30 is the new 18.
I think he gets right into that team, though, right?
At least in the squad. He'd be huge off the bench at the very least.
Or if you wanted to play with a 10. He's the only natural 10 we'd basically have, and he's in the form of his life as well. So I'd be open to it. I just wondered, I see this all the time. Isn't there ways to get him fast tracked? And I don't know off the top of my head.
I think that's also it depends too if you can like how they would determine like, oh, they could be like, he came halfway through the summer, but technically he came at the start of 2021. I know that was some discussion when Tati Castellanos almost randomly switched the US men's national team, and it turns out he missed the cutoff by like 6 months or something, which was crazy. There's also scenarios like that where they're like, oh, maybe he actually did come a little earlier than July, August.
I'll have to see about the interview him again.
Honestly, if we can fast track Ryan Gauld, that would be a huge get. It would be hilarious if it happens like 1 week before the World Cup, like the rosters are about to drop. It's like, oh, just got him in. Sorry, whoever.
The fun fact is that's when you see the biggest dual nat switches is a week before, or not a week, but like whenever the roster drop happens, you'll see players who are like, all right, I'll do it, and they'll make the switch, and then they'll join. I know Morocco had a couple, like the guy off of Burnley, I can't remember his last name, but he said no originally, and then like basically gave him the opportunity. He's like, do you want to come to the World Cup or not? Never played for Morocco before. He said yes. He switched from Belgium to Morocco. He went to the World Cup. You see all kinds of examples. What better?
Brahim Diaz too at Real Madrid just switched to Morocco, and he'd rejected Morocco before. Now they have a Real Madrid player.
Probably saw how well they did, better than Spain. But like what a better like opportunity than to it's right in front of your face. Not 4 years from now, right now. Do you want to make the switch or not? Do you want to go to a World Cup? It's hard for players to reject it unless they think they really have an opportunity at the other nation or have a better connection to themselves. So you never know. We'll have to wait and see what happens with Gauld. I would love it if we could get him in sooner rather than later instead of a week before the World Cup. But, it's one thing we'll try to keep an eye on from our side and share with the viewers as we learn things.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ancelotti, Mourinho, I think that they've seen their last days being, linked to the Canadian men's national team job. Who are we saying moving forward? I mean, obviously there's an actual short list now, but are we saying Zidane? Are we saying
up next?
Next?
Yeah, Canada swoops in over Manchester United to get Zidane. What a story that would be.
I mean, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm biased, but I would pick. I'd pick Canada over Manchester United.
Yeah, Aitor.
Brilliant. We need a OneSoccer staff soccer scrimmage live stream, says Billy Co Gaming.
Hey,
it's actually not a bad idea.
I'm open to that. I'd love to get the boots.
It's got to be
out.
studs up, tackles only.
We have to draft the teams and make like Jordan Wilson one of the captains or something.
Oh, I forgot about Jordan.
Make him the captain. Like, whoever's the
tackle.
closest in level to him is the other captain. So
Yeah, just recruit it. We'll get Craig to go in one of the goals, so it'll be fine. He can be the other captain.
Or sign a former ex-pro to be the other celebrity captain alongside Jordan.
No, we can do like OneSoccer, like the commentary guys. Like you get Jimmy Brennan involved. We have Craig Forrest now. So someone can play
Conway.
net. John Conway, the other net, yeah.
Couple keepers. It'd be fun. We should look into that. Get
How
out.
much does it cost to rent out? How much does it cost to rent out BC Place?
It's right to PC Place.
Because in MLS Cup last year, the American media, they did a media scrimmage at MLS Cup, so there could be some sort of potential.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's fly everybody out for the Wrexham game and then get like a celebrity match. Get like Ryan Reynolds on one, Rob McElhenney on the other, and then just OneSoccer staff.
All right.
OneSoccer yearly charity match and stream it. Hell yeah.
That would
Dimitri,
be.
you can't play goalkeeper though.
Hey, we're cooking ideas here live. This is kind of got a little off track, but we're gonna end the stream now, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, 1.5 hours. It's good.
Keep an eye on the charity match and Ryan Reynolds captaining one team, so that'll be fun. Thank you guys all for tuning in. On your way out, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and we'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.
And stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated.